Churches were meat markets. Wow, this is some heavy stuff. It gets darker and darker, or does it? Have I already gone absolute dark? Um, well, it's absolutely important for us to know who rules our world, what kind of vile, despicable, subhuman humans rule our world, who built this world, who built the old cities before the Industrial Revolution, gave us ugly cities, utilitarian cities, the same vile, subhuman creatures. We must be honest with ourselves, absolutely, and have no illusions about where we are and where we could be going. If you think things are bad now, just wait a little longer. Churches were meat markets. Well, do you think meat markets always look the way they do today in our shiny grocery stores? Everything wrapped neatly in aisles, very functional. Perhaps it was a little uglier in 100 years ago, 150 years ago, beginning of this industrial world. That these are images of New York's meat markets. Um, I've lived in Toronto. Toronto was famous for being, for having a enormous meat market. It was nicknamed Hog Town. Some meat markets look significantly better than what we have in most places around the world now. This is, I believe, meat market in central Valencia, Italy. It's not very old, built in the early 20th century. Here, an image of a meat market. Come, come, don't be shy. The remains of a cattle and meat market that once operated in Glasgow. It looks like quite a neoclassical building, that only the facade remains. But my point is that meat markets didn't always look the way they do today. I don't know how long ago this was built. I'm guessing early 1800s at the latest, more likely before that. And to get back to my thesis, churches, cathedrals, well, churches is shorthand for cathedrals and basilicas, all holy Christian places. But I could expand that to include other holy places in other uh, places, places that worship other gods and religions. I've looked at this painting before. I forgot what it's called. Let's have a look. Meat stall with Holy Family giving alms, reputedly from 1551. I don't believe that. But I bring it to our attention again because the painter has hinted that this is This scene belongs in a church. Here in the top left-hand corner, we do have the image of a church. And through this window, the holy scene of the Virgin Mary carrying her child and handing the symbolic meat of her child to hungry people. And in the air, we have crows flying this way. Crows. And these symbols here, these are some of the first logos, logos that predate the modern age. These logos belong to cattle ranchers, maybe human ranchers. Let's keep this in mind. Yes, this painting has hinted that churches were meat markets. This scene is actually not set in a meat market, but the church was set intentionally. The top left-hand corner, as a hint. Here's the wonderful, um, is it cathedral of, what's that lady called in somewhere in France? How can I forget? Um, in any case, I need to focus on rose windows for a moment. What on earth are rose windows for? I used to dream it was for permitting sunshine, but that didn't make much sense. I mean, for allowing sunshine in for cooking purposes, but these windows are in the wrong places. Plus, they're a little too, the window itself is interrupted by this, what they call tracery. So I was a little lost. What on earth was the purpose of rose windows, and why call them rose windows? They don't look especially like roses. Perhaps any other flower's name would suit these windows as well. Um, but while I'm at it, excuse me, these statues and statues of humans everywhere. The entire facade is 50% covered with human figures. What is the purpose? And they're also inside. Um, of course, this is not unique among cathedrals. So, what is the purpose? I believe it's highly indicative of the cult we are dealing with. A cult that is determined and successful at objectifying human bodies, treating human bodies as objects rather than thinking, feeling creatures. Objectification has gone mad here. And this is necessary. This is very, very helpful or necessary is maybe a better word. This objectification is highly necessary, a prerequisite for ritual cultural cannibalism. We can gape and admire the craftsmanship as much as we want. Ultimately, this is something not healthy, objectifying humans. And uh, let's call these rose windows too. Above this rose window is the crucified Jesus, or the hung meat of an innocent man. And I will argue, I will, let's, I, I don't think it's speculate anymore, that these windows were display cases. These sunken windows were display cases for human meat, human carcasses. They were displayed here. That is the function of rose windows, or should we call them crows windows? Imagine crows being attracted to such places hung with fresh meat. The word display also deserves some attention. It contains the word splay. And to splay means to spread out the limbs, as Jesus is partly splayed. His arms are splayed, not his legs. He is displayed. Yes, the language also contains hints, because you and I didn't create it, but the cannibals did, I suspect. There is someone on the web who goes by the name of Immortal Gothic, who wrote and posted a short story called The Rose Windows, sorry, The Rose Windows Secret. It's quite a gothic, dark story that really tells us nothing about our past, but does hint a little. Um, it's about a investigation into the death of a archivist who was digging too deep into the secrets of his church, his cathedral. He was warned not to dig too deep. And um, he discovered that across from the rose window was another window, a, a hidden chamber lined with another window concealed within the very walls. Um, well, we don't know what was in that chamber. Um, so the story is quite obscure and not very useful, but it hints at the fact that rose windows were much more than decorative elements, and they certainly were not intended to represent the perfection of the divine. No, they had a practical function. Very practical. If you like meat, buying meat. Yes, the aristocrats buy their meat in dingy little meat market on a street in New York in the 1900s or 1800s. No, they did everything grandiose. Um, we have plenty of some stories about angelic encounters inside churches. The angels in the glass. Yes, well, originally, I argue all rose windows were empty did not have stained glass in them. These are later additions. They were really open, large vents, as giant meat markets do need large vents. How how were churches kept warm, these meat markets kept warm in Northern Europe, in Europe generally during the winter. But it's probably not too difficult. They probably had ways of heating the stone with maybe magnifying glasses or fire. Warm up the stones if necessary, outdoors with fire, and then carry them in. But nevertheless, must stay focused. The singing windows of Tuskegee University in 1932. Well, this is someone designing windows that were supposed to sing, which reminds me, once more we have stories circulating, claims circulating that rose windows produce, or were meant to produce, healing frequencies. Yes, the same as church bells. And there is no evidence for this. No one has proven that people living near, or who once lived near churches, cathedrals with rose windows were healthier than others. And no one knows how to replicate such an such a phenomenon with a scientific experiment. Um, let's move on to something a little darker. Oh, I seem to have missed. There are many stories, yes, in the Americas, Central and South Americas, about a headless priest moaning and screaming near his church. From whence do such stories arise? Who plants these stories in our minds? I dare say it's not your uncle and aunt, your grandmother or mother. It's the sick people who are controlling our culture and laughing at us now with these stories about healing frequencies. Yes, one day they'll look at aircraft carriers and claim those were used to produce healing frequencies. One day. Well, here are some images of rose windows with no glass, or with clear glass, or who knows what's behind that one. They do exist still. This one seems to have clear glass behind it. And it's difficult to find evidence that rose windows were used as meat display elements. But they did remind me of wheels, these wheels of torture. And if we go back, yes, they are wheel-shaped. Many of them very much wheel-shaped. A little more intricate than a typical wheel with spokes, but nevertheless, the basic design is a wheel with spokes. So I looked at length at these breaking wheels, the wheels of fortune, wheels of torture, fortune, torture. Maybe those words are related. And I thought, this stuff doesn't make any sense. How do you make sense of this as a torture device? How is the wheel operating on these two triangles? Here's another one. Well, man's holding up a wheel. Is he going to smash it down on this man lying on the ground? And then we see these other wheels on poles with broken bodies, splayed, of course, splayed, up in the air. For what purpose? That makes no sense. How was that wheel used to harm the man? Looks like the man was harmed first and then thrown upon the wheel. It's not a breaking wheel. There's no wheel here. There's a splayed man. Here we have the wheels on poles again, one pole mounted with a decapitated head. I suspect these pictures are not accurate representations of the past. They are deceptions, at best hints, this wheel. The wheels here are referencing rose windows, rose, 'cause raise, raise up, lift up. Those rose windows are quite high. It all starts to make sense. There's another wheel on a post. And this man is attached to a wheel. I'm being beaten. The wheel itself is not doing anything. There's a butcher, not a soldier. There's no armor. Man decided to use an axe. All right. I guess that we use that with animals still in some places. Crack the neck. Seems to be a hot iron, a pincer. But the wheels don't seem to have any real function here, except to display. Well, this skeleton reputedly was, or this person had his bones broken reputedly by a wheel, but I don't understand how. Was he driven over by a loaded cart? There's a lovely lady with a sword and a wheel. Well, the sword is for butchery, the wheel was for displaying. Is that how it works? I believe so. There's a man wrapped around a wheel. And maybe there are spikes down here, but um, would that really, is that how they worked? Is that how they killed people with a wheel? Um, it seems a bit strange. Why not just drop the man on the spikes if these are spikes? And this is an image from Brogo's painting, The Triumph of Death, to which I devoted an entire video lecture. And I wondered at the time, what what on earth is this device? Why would they put a human splayed again, legs parted? There's a crow up there. I mean, what's the purpose? It's not like a crucifix. If, they say crosses were used to display criminals in public so everyone could see the consequences of crime and be deterred by it. I don't buy that. But, well, if that's true and this isn't having that function, no one's seeing, no, the public can't see this person. Not very well. I think it's a reference to rose windows. And it turns out that, well, we'll have a look at that painting again later. There's the wheel again. Now it's just being used as a chopping table. Another one, another man being rolled, being twisted around a wheel, and there's no spikes, nothing. I don't know how is this working? It makes no sense. Have to zoom in a bit. There's one man splayed, and above him another man attached to a wheel. But why? How is that working? Well, let's move on to yes, sure, more. There's more. There's so much of this. We've seen some of these already. And here is the triumph of death. I just wanted to have another look at it. Hmm. My previous video lecture was about bells, and I argued that they are cooking devices, the giant lids of large cookware. And well, perhaps that's confirmed by the fact that Bruegel has these two bells hanging with fire in the background. Hot, hot bells is maybe implied. And on the opposite side, we have the display posts, display wheels for meat cooking on one side, meat displayed on the other side. In this corner, the table for eating, and in the other corner, the sacrificial king intended to be eaten. So it's all very nicely organized with in the center, the actual source of heat, the magnifying glass. Now I was reminded, oops, come back, of crow's nests. These, the strange devices of wheels on poles did remind me of crow's nests. And, well, they have their own mystery. There is some discussion about what on, how did they function? What was their function? Apparently, they wouldn't provide much better view than men standing on another part of the ship. Here's, would you even want to stand in such a basket? Its sides are flared outwards. That's what designed to make you topple out of it. I don't think this was meant for people to stand in. Then what? I mean, obviously, you couldn't even stand in this one. As I said, there is some discussion about how these things functioned. This one doesn't look so safe either. And yes, let me just read a little. I have looked at photographs of several ships, past and present, and the crows. Well, yes, before I forget, why call them crow's nests if they are meant to provide superior vision for sailors? Maybe eagle's nest would be a better word. Eagles are known to look to have very good vision. Crows, not so much. Why call them crow's nests? Is it because meat or the remains of meals were put in crow's nests? Why not throw it overboard, you might ask. Um, well, we are dealing with psychopaths. Maybe they enjoyed knowing that and seeing that crows were feasting on the remains of human beings. Human beings they carried below deck. Fresh meat. Of course, they didn't just salt everything to death as later sailors or did. No, the aristocracy would not sail anywhere without the best food in their minds. Fresh meat. Well, you try to put a cow below deck, it might be difficult. Humans, it's maybe more manageable. Anyway, the lookouts in the crow's nest would not have had much advantage in the distance they could see compared to those on the bridge. However, the advantage of crow's nest has been explained as follows. Those on the bridge were too busy. The view from the crow's nest is less cluttered than that from the bridge. I don't think so. Look, we saw all those ropes around. So um, the lookouts have a wider field of view. I don't think so. And I don't think it's necessary at all, not when they already had binoculars and telescopes. You don't need to raise yourself up 20 feet higher than the bridge to get some special advantage. And those people knew where they were going um, by the stars, and I suppose. Um, there are even reports that officers on the bridge can see things before people on the crow's nest. Indeed. And just imagine standing on a crow's nest, trying to keep your balance, perched up there. Uh, you know, ships are uh, shaky on deck, being up on the mast. That amplifies the shakiness considerably. No, you wouldn't want to be there trying to look for something. And here's a crazy ship with an enclosed crow's nest. Pourquoi? I don't know. Crow's nest, or the rose nest, the rose windows. It's all about food. Here is a famous rose window filled in with the stained glass windows portraying the Last Supper of Jesus, the ultimate human sacrifice. Created by Pastori, the pastor for priest. Yes. Another stained glass window. They are often full of people. Why is that? Why not, flowers? No, this one has the Lamb of Christ, Jesus, in the center, the sacrificial lamb that must be eaten, and all these sacrificial kings. Yes, they did a reset. They tried to hide their crimes, but couldn't resist hinting, basing all their decor on their crimes. It's good for a laugh in their minds as people worship this stuff, and they know that this is not something to be worshipped and gawked at. Traditional canonical art rarely depicts people literally stuck inside the stone and glass structure of a rose window. But the concept appears in or relates to several thematic areas in art, folklore, and literature. Medieval allegory, Fortuna's wheel. Rose windows often feature radial patterns reminiscent of the wheel, yes, of fortune or torture. To small changes to those letters would turn fortune into torture. Stories and depictions of this concept show figures clinging to the wheel, reigning at the top or falling trapped at the bottom. These allegories represent the inevitable cycles of life. No, they don't represent that. They represent the history of rose windows being used as display elements, display features The mystical rose. One moment. Come on. Scroll a little bit for me. Okay. The mystical rose. Rose windows are often dedicated to the Virgin Mary, known as the mystical rose. Um, of course, he was also the bearer of the foremost human sacrifice, Jesus. In this context, holy figures, saints, kings, prophets are often depicted within rose windows. While they are not stuck in a painful way, they are permanently embedded in the glass, in the rose window. And people have commented about, I think, the north rose window of Notre Dame in uh, Reims, Reims, France. It has, I don't know, dozens, maybe 50 or more biblical images, biblical persons represented in its intricacies, and staring at them makes people think all those characters are actually stuck there. Some medieval stained glass, such as that at the Getty Art Museum, depicts figures showing intense grief and pain, sometimes appearing confined within the small crowded panes. The North Rose window of Notre Dame, um, well, we'll have a look at that later. Okay. Yes, this is a list of the characters displayed in the north-facing rose window of Notre Dame, Paris. And hold on a moment. I'm going to go through, I don't know, the first 12 dozen or so names on this list. Uh, the Virgin Mary with child is in the center. I'll skip her. I've spoken already about her and her child. Her, sometimes the letter CH in English is pronounced as a K. That would make child killed. Hmm. I don't think that's by chance, because other Germanic languages don't have a close, what's the word, relative for that name. In German and Dutch, it's kind, which is related to kind. Makes more sense. But back to the rose window. Um, the first character on the list is the prophet Hosea. His name contains the letters OS, which is Germanic for ox, one of the favorite prey of the aristocrats. Also, his book of prophecies is full of food metaphors. Number two, the prophet Micah. His name is Hakim backwards, which is Arabic for sage. Sage is also a name of a popular herb. Micah also used agricultural metaphors. Food, food, food. Number three, the prophet Jonah. Well, he famously became whale food. The prophet Malachi. Mal plus Akai, the second being Hebrew, the second element, equals bad brother. Also, he used many food metaphors. Daniel, the prophet Daniel, was nearly cooked in a great furnace. The prophet Zechariah prophesied the destruction of the horns, aka the ruminant prey, aka us. Yes, the Bible doesn't prophesy the destruction of any particular ethnic group. No, the people who wrote it wanted our destruction. All of, let's call us humanity and them, well, the aristocrats, the aristocrats. Ezekiel, another prophet. His name contains the word ezel or ezel, which is Dutch and I think German for donkey. Very good meat. I've just watched a documentary on that. He also has, Ezekiel does, a vision of bones, the remnants, I say, of a Holocaust feast. Um, the stained glass window also portrays Pharaoh's dream, the Egyptian Pharaoh from Genesis. In his dream, he saw 7 fat cows eaten by 7 thin cows, and 7 healthy ears of grain swallowed by 7 withered ones. Food, it's all about food. The prophet Zephaniah, who in verse 118 wrote, "In the fire of his jealousy, the whole earth will be consumed." A word that can mean eaten. For he will make, God will make a sudden end of all who live on the earth. Yes, what psychopaths, psychopathic God and psychopathic authors. Elias, or otherwise known as Elijah, he famously cooked or helped God cook and eat from an altar. The prophet Habakkuk, his name contains the word cook. The prophet Jeremiah, lots of language related to eating. In Jeremiah 15:16, quote, "Your words were found, and I ate them, and your words became to me a joy and the delight of my heart." Um, Next, in Jeremiah 24, the fig basket, he explains the fate of the Israelites. The good figs, yeah, the tasty ones will be saved, and the bad ones thrown to destruction. Yeah, well, I suppose if you're a good fig, you'll also be destroyed by God's teeth. Devouring the scroll, another interesting passage in Jeremiah, well, similar to Ezekiel. Um, Moving on to Prophet Nahum, also full of, well, I have too much to read here. I'll keep it short. Um, Elias, another Elijah, he gets represented twice, perhaps because there is a Elijah and an Elisha in the Bible, and the the images are a bit confusing, just as the names are. The prophet Haggai or haggis, Scottish dish made of sheep organs. Haggai did speak of hunger and a heart. The prophet Isaiah prophesies the coming of Emmanuel. I am Manuel, I am a slave. And he frequently used food, drink, and agricultural metaphors. Uh, Too many to share with you, easy to find. And in the middle circle of that enormous rose window is other characters such as Solomon, whose name sounds a bit like salmon, spelled that way, and Saul, which looks a lot like sole, another fish, and Samuel has the words mule and ass in it. I could go on, but time is limited. I know. I think I've made my point. So, moving on to Renaissance paintings of butcher shops and meat markets. I thought I had to bring this to our attention because the alleged painter is Annabelle. Annabelle. Ooh, that is too close to cannibal. Just take off the E and add a C. Cannibal. Karachi. The double C. The 33 of the Freemasons. And I think he did a second one. There we go. Another butcher shop. It's hard to tell what kind of animal that was. Nah, not human. They wouldn't go that far. And this one, more recent, the late Romantic period, it is also a butcher shop, please. There we go. And but this is no ordinary butcher shop. This is could be a church. Yes, it could be. Next, before we finish, display cases made of glass are in many, many churches around the world, and they contain human bodies. Um, Fake ones, mummified ones. This one is covered in wax. It is a bit morbid, isn't it? But more than that, it is much more than that. Here's a very ornate display case containing the relic of Saint Antoninus. It is in Florence, the Church of San Marco. Well, I would like to suggest that these display cases once contained actual meat, actual human, freshly slaughtered corpses. Because, as I say, churches were meat markets for the rich and powerful. I know it's hard for us to imagine that people would build such grandiose, beautiful buildings and use them as slaughterhouses, kitchens, and meat markets. But we are dealing with crazy people, and all the grandiosity, so-called beauty, is part of was necessary to create the atmosphere needed, or the psychology needed to be cannibals. It's a distraction, it's self-glorification. Somehow it makes cannibalism look wonderful, part of a amazing world. That's the illusion they needed to be cannibals. Um, many, this one is in Austria, I believe. Angle heart cell. Heart cell. It's got the word heart and cell in it. Well, how nice is that? Um, Many of its coffins, it has many, many glass coffins, I call them display cases, have the corpses of children, highly sought after, tender meat, disgusting people. And they are still our rulers. I'm not, this is not only about the past. The world has changed. Our leaders are not um, openly committing cannibalism, but they have their secret places. This is a place yeah, same place in Austria. I think they have, well, just two photos. These are two different, very beautiful display cases. Skeletons now, but it's what a waste, you know. What a waste. Put a skeleton in a in a display case like that? Come on. That was not its original function. So I hope this has somehow created or persuaded a persuasive argument that these rose windows, these rose wheels, these crow's nests, these display windows were used to hang human meat, human carcasses, just as Jesus here. Oops, won't do that. Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Just as Jesus here. Come back, Jesus. Down here. Yes, is displayed. And really, all these statues are displays and objectifications of human beings. I hope this gives you some insight into the psyche of those who rule over us. Have no illusions about where we live, about progress, the economy, politics, democracy, medicine. We live in a madhouse, and it's up to us to create something better.